I'm Abigail Mitchell, 28, and last month my billionaire grandfather Harrison died, leaving me a $99 million check that my father William burned right in front of me. The funny thing? I smiled when he did it. We were all gathered for the will reading at Harrison's mansion when my father's face twisted with rage at the special bequest. What my father destroyed that day wasn't what he thought. Before I tell you what really happened that day, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you want to hear how I turned my father's betrayal into the best thing that ever happened to me. To understand why my father would burn $99 million, you need to know about the Mitchell family. My grandfather Harrison built Mitchell Properties from nothing into a real estate empire worth over $500 million. He was a self-made man who started with one small apartment building in the 1970s and expanded methodically across the country. He was intimidating to most, but to me, he was just Grandpa Harry, the man who snuck me extra cookies and encouraged me to paint when everyone else said it was impractical. My earliest memories of him aren't in boardrooms or at construction sites, but in his home studio where he'd paint landscapes on Sundays. Few people knew about this side of him. "Business is what I do, Abby," he once told me when I was 9, "but this is who I am." He kept a small gallery of my childhood artwork in his private study, something I didn't discover until after he died. William, my father, had a very different relationship with Harrison. As the only son, he was groomed from birth to continue the Mitchell legacy. Every accomplishment was met with a higher expectation, every success with a new goal. Nothing was ever enough for Harrison when it came to William. At least, that's how my father saw it. "Your grandfather doesn't understand what it's like to live in someone else's shadow," my father would complain after their frequent arguments. "He built everything from nothing. I'm just supposed to not mess it up." My mother Grace was the peacemaker in our family before breast cancer took her when I was 15. She had a way of soothing my father's wounded pride and tempering my grandfather's criticism. Without her, the tension between them only grew worse. While my father obsessed over property values and investment returns, I found my calling in art education. After college, instead of accepting a cushy executive position at Mitchell Properties, I took a job teaching art at a public school in a low-income neighborhood. My small apartment could fit in my father's garage, and my annual salary was what he spent on a single business dinner. "You're wasting your potential," he'd lecture at our mandatory Sunday dinners at my grandfather's estate. A Mitchell shouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck. What my father never knew was that Harrison secretly visited my classroom once. He sat in the back, watching as I helped fifth graders explore color theory. Afterward, he said nothing about me coming to work for him. Instead, he asked about my students' projects and donated art supplies anonymously to the school. "Your mother would be proud," was all he said before leaving. My younger brother James took a different approach. He joined the family business right after business school, but his heart wasn't in it. During late-night calls, he'd confess his misery. "I'm living Dad's dream, not mine," he'd say after particularly rough weeks. "Sometimes I wish I had your courage, Abby." Our family dynamics played out predictably at Sunday dinners. My father would boast about new acquisitions and development deals. James would nod along silently. Harrison would occasionally undercut my father's enthusiasm with questions about sustainability or community impact. I'd try to change the subject when tensions rose. We functioned less like a family and more like uncomfortable business associates who happened to share DNA. "Family is the most important asset," Harrison would toast at holiday gatherings, though none of us knew how to actually be one. 3 months ago, Harrison was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start. Even with his considerable resources, some things money can't fix. He faced death the same way he faced business challenges, pragmatically and with careful planning. None of us realized how Harrison's final act would tear our family apart or ultimately heal wounds decades in the making. "Money reveals character," as my grandfather often said. We were about to learn exactly what he meant. The reading of Harrison's will took place in his study exactly 1 week after the funeral. It was a room that perfectly embodied my grandfather, imposing mahogany bookshelves lined with leather-bound classics he actually read, a massive desk where countless deals were negotiated, and subtle touches of warmth if you knew where to look. Like the small drawer where he kept chocolates for my childhood visits, or the hidden panel concealing his painting supplies. Family portraits spanned 3 generations on one wall. I noticed my grandfather had recently added a professional photograph of me with my art students from last year's exhibition. My father's gaze lingered on it briefly, his expression unreadable. Mr. Peterson, the family attorney who had worked with Harrison for over 40 years, arranged us around the large conference table. His thin white hair and wire-rimmed glasses gave him the appearance of a character from a Dickens novel. Despite his fragile appearance, his voice commanded attention. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, adjusting his glasses. Harrison was very specific about how this proceeding should be conducted. I surveyed the room. My father sat rigid in his chair, fingers drumming impatiently against the polished wood. James slouched beside him, looking uncomfortable in his rarely worn suit. Aunt Eleanor, Harrison's younger sister, dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. My cousins Rebecca and Michael sat awkwardly at the far end, their presence more obligation than connection. The distribution began predictably enough. Longtime household staff received generous pensions. Harrison's charitable foundation received substantial funding. Aunt Eleanor was given the family vacation home in Maine she'd always loved plus $10 million. My cousins each received $5 million, life-changing money for them, but pocket change in the scope of the overall estate. James was bequeathed $20 million and full ownership of a promising new development project he'd been championing against my father's objections. His eyes widened in surprise as Mr. Peterson announced it. Then came the bombshell. "To my granddaughter Abigail, I leave the enclosed check for $99 million, Mr. Peterson announced, removing an envelope from his briefcase, along with this sealed letter, to be opened at her discretion. The room fell silent. I couldn't process the words as Mr. Peterson handed me both items. The check felt impossibly heavy in my hand. $99 million. More money than I could spend in several lifetimes. My father's face contorted, first in confusion, then disbelief, finally settling into unmistakable rage. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. "There must be a mistake," he sputtered. "That's nearly a fifth of the entire estate." Aunt Eleanor gasped audibly, whispering something to Rebecca I couldn't hear. James shot me a look of concern, subtly shaking his head as if warning me to stay quiet. "There is no mistake, William," Mr. Peterson continued calmly. Harrison was of sound mind and very deliberate in his decisions. I sat frozen, the check and letter in my hands feeling like they might burst into flames at any moment. I hadn't asked for this. Didn't want it. Couldn't understand why my grandfather would put me in this position. The remainder of the estate, approximately $350 million in assets, properties, and cash, will go to William, Mr. Peterson continued, then paused, adjusting his glasses again. "With one condition." My father's eyes narrowed. "What condition?" "That you honor all bequests as specified, including Abigail's inheritance, without contest or interference. Should you contest any portion of the will or interfere with any beneficiary's access to their inheritance, your portion will be redistributed to the Harrison Mitchell Charitable Foundation." The silence in the room was deafening. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Without a word, he shoved back from the table and stormed out, the heavy study door slamming behind him with enough force to rattle the family photographs on the wall. Mr. Peterson continued methodically through the remaining details, but I barely heard him. The check in my hand represented more money than I could comprehend, and the sealed letter burned with unspoken secrets. Whatever Harrison had intended, he had just placed me directly in my father's line of fire. "What game are you playing, Abigail?" My father's voice cut through the silence of his home office later that evening. He'd summoned me after hours of silence, his text message brooking no argument. My office. 8 p.m. The room was a shrine to Mitchell's success, awards, deal tombstones, and photographs with celebrities and politicians lined the walls. A single lamp cast harsh shadows across his face as I sat in the uncomfortable chair across from him. "I'm not playing any game," I replied, keeping my voice level. I was as surprised as everyone else. $99 million. He spat the words like they were poison. He spent 40 years training me to run this company, and then he gives you, an art teacher, $99 million. Dad, I didn't ask for this. Of course you did. He slammed his hand on the desk, making me flinch. All those private conversations, the special visits. You've been manipulating him for years while the rest of us were actually working. James appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Dad, you need to calm down. This isn't Abby's fault. Stay out of this, James. This is between your sister and me. My father's eyes never left my face. Harrison was losing his mind at the end. That's the only explanation for this insanity. That's not true, I said quietly. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. Then enlighten me, my father challenged, leaning forward. Why would he undermine everything I've built? Why would he give you enough money to become a significant shareholder and meddle in company business when you've never shown any interest or aptitude for it? The sealed letter felt heavy in my pocket. I hadn't opened it yet, wanting privacy for whatever final message my grandfather had left me. What's in the letter, Abigail? My father's voice softened dangerously. What did he tell you that he couldn't tell me, his own son? James moved into the room, positioning himself subtly between us. Dad, this isn't going to solve anything. I deserve to know, my father insisted. After everything I sacrificed for this family, I deserve to know why he'd betray me like this. Part of me wanted to leave, to open the letter in the safety and privacy of my own apartment. But another part recognized that this moment, however painful, might be our only chance at honesty. Fine, I said finally. We can open it together. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal on the envelope and unfolded the thick stationery bearing my grandfather's distinctive letterhead. James moved closer, reading over my shoulder as I began aloud. My dearest Abigail, if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. Don't waste time mourning me. I've lived a full life and have few regrets. You're holding a check for $99 million. It's an obscene amount of money, especially for someone like you who has never cared about wealth. That's precisely why I'm entrusting it to you. Money reveals character, Abby. It doesn't create it. Your father never understood that. Despite my best efforts, he came to see money as the measure of a person's worth rather than a tool to create meaning. I'm giving you this inheritance because you're the only Mitchell who sees beyond the balance sheet. I've established the legal framework for you to create the Mitchell Arts Foundation, supporting arts education in underserved communities nationwide. The paperwork is with Jessica Chen at Winthrop Legal Group. I know this puts you in a difficult position with your father. For that, I apologize. But I've watched you stand firm in your convictions despite years of his disapproval. You have your mother's compassion and my stubborn resolve, a powerful combination. I hope William will surprise me. I hope seeing you entrusted with this responsibility might help him recognize what truly matters. But if not, remember that you don't need his approval to do what's right. All my love, Grandpa Harry. I finished reading, my voice barely above a whisper. The office was completely silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall, a wedding gift to my parents from Harrison. My father's expression shifted from anger to disbelief to something deeper and more wounded. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy still desperately seeking his father's approval. A foundation, he finally said. That's what this is about? Arts education. It sounds like Grandpa wanted, James began. I know what it sounds like, my father snapped. It sounds like he never respected anything I accomplished. It sounds like he thought I was nothing but a money-hungry disappointment. Dad, that's not, I tried to interject. 40 years, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. 40 years of building this company, expanding his legacy, making us one of the most respected families in the country. And his final act is to publicly humiliate me by giving my daughter, who rejected everything we stand for, control of $100 million. Before I could respond, he snatched both the letter and check from my hands. Dad, James protested. What are you doing? With deliberate movements, my father crossed to the fireplace where embers still glowed from earlier in the evening. Without hesitation, he tossed both items into the fire. No. James lunged forward, but it was too late. We watched as the flames consumed my grandfather's final words and the $99 million check. The paper blackened and curled, Harrison's signature disappearing into ash. My father turned to me, his expression triumphant yet somehow hollow. There. Problem solved. What happened next confused him completely. Instead of crying or screaming or threatening legal action, I smiled slightly. "What's so funny?" he demanded, his triumph faltering. "Nothing," I said quietly, gathering my purse. "I should go." "That's it?" He looked bewildered by my calm. "You just lost $99 million. I paused at the doorway, meeting his gaze directly. "Did I?" I left him standing by the fireplace, staring at the ashes of what he thought was his victory. James followed me to my car, his expression a mix of horror and confusion. "Abby, what just happened? Are you okay?" "That was $99 million. "I'm fine, James," I assured him, a sense of peace settling over me. "Better than fine, actually." "I don't understand." I squeezed his hand. "You will. Soon." As I drove away, I felt strangely liberated. My grandfather had been right about everything, especially about my father. What William Mitchell had burned wasn't what he thought. Not even close. 3 weeks before Harrison Mitchell died, I sat beside his hospital bed, holding his frail hand. The mighty titan of real estate had been reduced to a shadow, his once commanding presence diminished by illness. Yet his mind remained sharp as ever. "Abby, there's something important we need to discuss," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The private room was filled with flowers and cards, but he had refused all visitors that day except me. "About your inheritance." "Grandpa, I don't want to talk about money right now," I protested gently. "This isn't about money," he replied, his blue eyes so much like mine, suddenly intense. "It's about truth. About what kind of people we choose to be." He reached for a folder on his bedside table, wincing with the effort. I quickly retrieved it for him. "I've made provisions for you in my will," he explained as I settled back into my chair. A check for $99 million to be presented at the reading. I gasped, shaking my head in confusion. "Grandpa, I don't need that kind of money." "I don't even want it." "I know." His thin lips curved into a smile. "That's precisely why you're the right person to have it." He opened the folder, revealing legal documents with the letterhead of his personal attorney's firm. But the check is only part of it. In fact, it's not even the important part. Over the next hour, Harrison explained his plan. He had already established a trust in my name with the full $99 million. The check to be presented at the will reading was merely a copy, a symbol, a test. A test for whom? I asked, though I already knew the answer. "For your father," Harrison said, sadness evident in his voice. "I've failed him in many ways, Abby. I pushed too hard, expected too much, gave too little praise. But I've watched him become something I never intended, a man who values wealth above all else, even family." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "The will contains a provision that William must honor all bequests, including yours, to receive his inheritance. I want to give him one last chance to make the right choice." "And if he doesn't?" I asked quietly. "Then he will have taught himself the lesson I never could." Harrison's eyes drifted to the window, where late afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds. "But you need to know that no matter what happens at that reading, no matter what William does, your inheritance is secure. The trust is already funded. The foundation framework is already established." He showed me the documents proving the transfer, the trust details, the foundation charter waiting for my signature. Everything was in place, regardless of what happened to the ceremonial check. "Why not just tell him this?" I asked. Harrison's expression grew distant. "People reveal who they truly are not when they're being watched, but when they think no one will ever know. I need to see who William really is, not who he pretends to be for my benefit." "This will hurt him," I said, thinking of my father's pride, his desperate need for his father's approval. "Sometimes we need to be hurt to heal," Harrison replied. "I hope he surprises me. I hope he proves me wrong." Before I left that day, Harrison made me promise to keep our arrangement secret, even if William destroyed the check. Especially if he destroyed it. "Let him sit with his choice for a while," my grandfather advised. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we teach ourselves. Now, 3 months later, I sat in my small apartment, the real trust documents spread across my kitchen table. The Mitchell Arts Foundation was no longer just an idea, but a legal entity with $99 million in assets. My grandfather had planned for every contingency, even my father's predictable rage. I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness that my father had failed the test so spectacularly, vindication that my grandfather had trusted me so completely, and anxiety about the responsibility I now carried. But most of all, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth would come out eventually, but for now, I would honor my promise to Harrison. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Need to talk. Coffee tomorrow." I texted back a quick affirmative, then gathered the documents and locked them in my small safe. As I did, I noticed a small envelope I hadn't seen before, tucked into the foundation charter. Inside was a photograph of me at age 7, paintbrush in hand, standing proudly beside my first serious painting, an abstract jumble of colors that somehow resembled a sunset if you squinted. Harrison stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder, beaming with genuine pride. On the back, in his distinctive handwriting, "The true Mitchell legacy. Not what we build, but who we help build." I placed the photo on my refrigerator with a magnet, a reminder of what really mattered and the responsibility I now carried. My father had burned a piece of paper, thinking he had destroyed my inheritance. What he didn't understand was that the most valuable thing Harrison had left me couldn't be measured in dollars or burned in a fireplace. The real work was just beginning. "These projections look excellent, Ms. Mitchell," said Diana Warren, the financial advisor I'd hired to help navigate the complexities of running a multi-million-dollar foundation. "With proper management, the endowment should sustain operations indefinitely while still growing the principal." 3 months had passed since my father had burned what he thought was my inheritance. In that time, I'd assembled a small team of professionals to help bring my grandfather's vision and mine to life. We sat in a modest conference room in a downtown office building, surrounded by presentation boards and architectural renderings. "Please, call me Abigail," I reminded her, still uncomfortable with the formality my new position seemed to demand. "And thank you. I want to make sure we're being responsible with the resources while still making meaningful impact." Thomas Reeves, my legal counsel, nodded in approval. "The Foundation's charter gives you significant flexibility. You can fund existing programs, create your own initiatives, or both." "Both," I said decisively. "I want to start with 3 pilot centers in different communities, then expand based on what we learn. Each should offer free arts education, studio space for local artists, and community exhibition areas." As we continued discussing details, I couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically my life had changed. I'd taken a leave of absence from teaching to focus on launching the foundation, though I insisted on continuing to work with my students 1 day per week. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years resisting the Mitchell business empire, only to find myself running a different kind of Mitchell enterprise. The first news stories about the mysterious new Mitchell Arts Foundation had begun appearing in local business journals and arts publications. Most speculated about the funding source, with estimates falling well short of the actual amount. I had instructed my team to be deliberately vague about financial details, knowing that the full truth would eventually reach my father. James had discovered that truth within weeks of the will reading. Over coffee the day after my father burned the check, I'd explained everything. "So you have the money?" "All of it," he had asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes. Grandpa transferred it before he died. The check was just a symbol, a test for Dad." I stirred my latte nervously. "I need you to keep this between us for now." James had sat back, processing this revelation. Grandpa was always playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. "Are you going to tell Dad?" I'd asked, uncertain where my brother's loyalties would ultimately lie. He'd considered the question seriously before answering. "No, not yet. Dad made his choice. He should live with it for a while." To my surprise, James had offered to help with the foundation, using his business expertise to complement my vision. "I've been miserable working for Dad anyway. This feels like something that actually matters." Now, as the foundation took shape, My brother had become my strongest ally, attending meetings when his job allowed and offering insights into potential property acquisitions for our arts centers. The inevitable confrontation with my father loomed on the horizon. We still attended Sunday dinners, maintaining a strained facade of normalcy. William had been smugly satisfied since burning the check, convinced he'd thwarted Harrison's final attempt to undermine his authority. If he noticed my lack of distress or James's growing detachment, he didn't mention it. "We're breaking ground on the new Mitchell Plaza next month," my father announced at dinner 6 weeks after the will reading. 30 stories of premium office space and luxury condominiums. The mayor himself is attending the ceremony. "Congratulations," I offered flatly. James pushed his food around his plate. "What happened with the community space we discussed?" The plans originally included an accessible public area with local vendors. Scaled back, my father dismissed with a wave. "The ROI wasn't there. We need to maximize revenue per square foot." "The community goodwill would have been valuable," James persisted, "especially with the neighborhood's concerns about gentrification." My father scoffed. "Since when do you care about community goodwill? Your job is to ensure the project meets financial targets, not win popularity contests with the locals." The casual cruelty with which he dismissed both the community's concerns and James's input was typical, but I noticed my brother's shoulders tense in a way they hadn't before. The old James would have backed down immediately. This James met our father's gaze steadily. "Times change, Dad. Smart development isn't just about extraction." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, broken by the housekeeper bringing in dessert. My father, clearly irritated by the challenge to his authority, changed the subject to a recent acquisition by a competitor. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. The financial press had picked up on the Mitchell Arts Foundation story, with the Wall Street Journal running a feature titled, "Mystery Mitchell Millions. New Foundation Launches Ambitious Arts Initiative." The article quoted sources familiar with the matter, suggesting the foundation was backed by tens of millions in funding. We were at Sunday dinner when my father's phone buzzed with a news alert. I knew immediately from his expression that the moment of reckoning had arrived. "What is this?" he demanded, thrusting his phone across the table. The article headline glared up at me. "Are you funding this with family connections? Using the Mitchell name for credibility?" I set down my fork calmly. "No, Dad. I'm funding it with the $99 million Grandpa left me." His face contorted in confusion, then anger. "That's impossible. I burned that check myself." "You burned a copy," I explained, maintaining my composure with effort. "Grandpa transferred the money to a trust in my name 3 weeks before he died. The check was symbolic." "A test." "A test?" His voice rose dangerously. "What are you talking about?" "Grandpa wanted to see what you would do," James interjected. "He hoped you'd respect his wishes, but he planned for the possibility that you wouldn't." My father's face drained of color as the implication sank in. "This is fraud. I'll contest it." "There's nothing to contest," I said. "The money was transferred legally while Grandpa was alive. It's not part of the estate. You kept this from me deliberately," he accused, his voice shaking with rage. "Both of you." "Yes," I admitted. "Grandpa asked me to. He thought you needed to learn a lesson about values." "Values?" my father erupted, standing so abruptly his chair toppled backward. "Harrison Mitchell lectures me about values from the grave? The man who worked 18-hour days and missed every important moment of my childhood? The man who criticized every accomplishment and magnified every failure? That man presumed to test my values." The raw pain in his voice made me flinch. For all his faults, my father's wounds were real. "Dad," James began, but William cut him off. "And you," he turned on my brother. "My own son. Conspiring behind my back." "This isn't about conspiracy," I insisted. "This is about doing something meaningful with the Mitchell fortune. Something beyond just making more money." "You think real estate isn't meaningful?" my father demanded. "We create homes, workplaces, communities. We employ thousands. What do you create with your little foundation? Finger paintings?" The dismissiveness stung, but I refused to be baited. Art centers in underserved neighborhoods. Scholarships for talented kids who couldn't afford lessons otherwise. Community spaces where people can express themselves and connect with others. "Yes, Dad." Meaningful. My father looked between us, seeming to realize for the first time that he was outnumbered. His expression hardened into something cold and resolute. I see how it is. Harrison turned you against me, even from the grave. He straightened his jacket with deliberate precision. You have a choice to make, both of you. The Mitchell family business or this little charity project. You can't have both. I stood slowly. That's not a choice at all, Dad. The foundation is happening with or without your blessing. I hoped you might eventually support it, but I don't need your permission. I've already resigned, James added quietly. My letter is on your desk. I'm joining the foundation as operations director. My father's expression froze in shocked betrayal. You would both choose paint and clay over your own family? Over your heritage? We're not choosing against family, James replied. We're choosing a different vision for what this family could be. Without another word, my father strode from the dining room. Moments later, we heard the front door slam and his car engine roar to life. James and I stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling around us. Well, my brother finally said, that went about as expected. I nodded, surprising myself with the feeling of lightness that came with finally having everything in the open. Grandpa knew it would happen this way. Do you think Dad will ever come around? James asked as we gathered our things to leave. I don't know, I admitted. But I hope so. As we walked out of the house that had never really felt like home, I realized we were walking toward something new, a vision of the Mitchell legacy that encompassed more than balance sheets and property portfolios. Whether my father would eventually be part of that vision remained to be seen. And this will be our digital media lab, I explained, leading the small tour group through what was once an abandoned warehouse in South Park. Construction crews had transformed the space over the past 2 months, turning a derelict building into a vibrant community arts center. We'll offer classes in everything from traditional photography to digital animation. The first Mitchell Arts Center was scheduled to open in 3 weeks. 2 others were under construction in different neighborhoods, each designed to serve the specific needs of its community. The launch had attracted more attention than I'd anticipated, with arts organizations, community advocates, and even politicians expressing support for our mission. James had proven himself an invaluable partner. His business acumen complemented my educational background perfectly. While I focused on programming and community engagement, he handled operations, finance, and strategic planning. Free from our father's shadow, he had flourished, revealing a passion for social entrepreneurship I'd never seen before. We're not just teaching art, he often explained to potential partners. We're creating spaces where creativity fosters community resilience. The foundation's rapid progress hadn't gone unnoticed by William Mitchell. True to form, he had attempted to undermine our efforts through his extensive business connections. Calls were made. Meetings were canceled. Potential contractors suddenly became unavailable. Your father suggested that working with the foundation might jeopardize their relationship with Mitchell Properties, our project manager had explained apologetically after our original construction firm withdrew. He has significant leverage in this industry. Yet for every door that closed, others opened. Media coverage of the Mitchell family drama had created unexpected public support. When word spread about William's interference, competitors to Mitchell Properties eagerly stepped forward, seeing an opportunity to both do good and potentially gain market advantage. The Washington Post ran a feature titled Mitchell vs. Mitchell, Real Estate Empire Faces Challenge from Within, which painted our foundation in a flattering light while raising uncomfortable questions about Mitchell Properties' business practices. The resulting public pressure forced William to back off his most obvious obstruction attempts. James and I threw ourselves into the work, often putting in 12-hour days. There was something deeply satisfying about physical exhaustion in service of something meaningful. Some evenings we would sit amid the construction debris, sharing takeout dinner and marveling at how much our lives had changed in just a few months. Do you ever miss it? I asked James one night as we reviewed curriculum plans. The prestige, the expense accounts, the family name opening doors. He considered the question seriously. I miss the security sometimes, he admitted, knowing exactly what each day would bring. But I never realized how suffocating that certainty was until I stepped away from it. He gestured to the arts center taking shape around us. This feels like something I chose, not something I inherited. The first center's opening exceeded all our expectations. Children from the surrounding neighborhoods flooded the studios, their faces alight with the joy of creative discovery. Parents expressed tearful gratitude for a safe, enriching space in a community that had long been overlooked by both public and private investment. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about the pottery class, one mother told me, squeezing my hand. She says she's going to be an artist like Ms. Abby. Such moments made the family rift easier to bear, though the absence of my father at the opening had been conspicuous. He had not spoken to either James or me since our confrontation 3 months earlier. Sunday dinners had ceased. Holiday plans remained uncertain. The Mitchell family had fractured along lines that had been invisibly forming for decades. Our second center opening attracted even more attention. Local news crews captured footage of children creating murals, learning digital design, and performing in the new Black Box Theater. Former students from my teaching days volunteered as program assistants. The vision was becoming reality in ways even I hadn't fully anticipated. It was at this second opening that Aunt Eleanor made her unexpected appearance. I spotted her at the back of the crowd during my welcome speech, elegant as always in her tailored suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. When our eyes met, she nodded slightly, her expression unreadable. After the formalities concluded, she approached me as I greeted community members. "This is quite an accomplishment," she observed, surveying the bustling activity around us. "Thank you for coming," I replied cautiously. Eleanor had always been firmly in my father's camp in family matters. "It means a lot." "Harrison would have been proud," she said quietly, surprising me. "He always said you had Grace's heart and his backbone. A formidable combination." She asked for a private tour, which I provided with some trepidation. To my surprise, she asked thoughtful questions about programming, community involvement, and long-term sustainability. As we concluded in my small office, she sat across from me with a directness reminiscent of my grandfather. "You know, Harrison wasn't always the titan people remember," she began, smoothing her skirt. "When we were children, he was just Harry, my protective big brother who loved to draw. Our father thought art was a waste of time, especially for a boy with Harrison's intelligence." "Grandpa never told me that," I said, fascinated by this glimpse into a history I'd never heard. "He buried that part of himself to become successful," Eleanor continued. "He believed it was necessary at the time. It was only in his later years that he began to regret the cost of that decision." She met my eyes directly. "He didn't want William to make the same mistake, but by then, the pattern was too established." "Is Dad okay?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Eleanor's expression softened. "He's struggling, Abigail. His pride is wounded, yes, but it's more than that. He truly believes he's been betrayed, first by Harrison, then by both his children. He doesn't know how to process that." "We didn't betray him," I protested. "We just chose a different path." "In William's world, that amounts to the same thing," she replied. "His identity is entirely wrapped up in Mitchell Properties and the dynasty he believed he was building. Without that, he doesn't know who he is." The conversation left me conflicted. On one hand, I remained convinced that our foundation's mission was worthy and important. On the other, I couldn't ignore the personal cost of the family rupture. For all his faults, William Mitchell was still my father. The success of one vision had come at the expense of another. James and I discussed the encounter later that evening over dinner at his apartment. "So what now?" he asked, refilling our wine glasses. "Do we reach out to Dad? Try to reconcile?" I turned the question over carefully. "I'm not sure he's ready to hear anything we have to say. And I'm not willing to abandon the foundation to appease him." "Neither am I," James agreed. "But maybe there's a middle path. Not compromise exactly, but coexistence." "Maybe," I conceded. "But he would have to make the first move. He created this ultimatum, not us." "Fair enough." James raised his glass in a toast. "To standing our ground, but keeping the door open." The foundation continued to grow over the next months. We opened our third center, launched a scholarship program for promising young artists, and began planning expansion to neighboring counties. Former business associates of my grandfather reached out with offers of support, many confessing that they too had artistic interests they'd subordinated to business success. The one-year anniversary of Harrison's death approached, bringing with it plans for a major celebration of the foundation's accomplishments. We organized a gala fundraiser featuring exhibitions of student work, live performances, and testimonials from community members whose lives had been touched by our programs. The event attracted coverage from national arts publications and local television stations. Philanthropists, artists, and civic leaders mingled with students and their families. The energy was electric, a testament to what we'd built from the ashes of my father's fireplace. I was speaking with a group of potential donors when James appeared at my elbow, his expression tense. "Dad's here," he whispered. I turned toward the entrance and saw him, William Mitchell, uncomfortably formal in his tuxedo, standing alone at the periphery of the celebration. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment, I couldn't read his expression. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was acknowledgement. And for now, perhaps that was enough. William Mitchell looked out of place among the vibrant artwork and casually dressed attendees of our anniversary gala. He stood rigid, hands clasped behind his back, examining a student mural as though it were a business proposal requiring careful analysis. I approached him cautiously, aware of curious glances from staff who recognized him from news coverage of our family drama. "Thank you for coming," I said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Eleanor insisted," he replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "Said I should see what you've built before condemning it entirely." An awkward silence stretched between us. A year ago, I might have rushed to fill it with justifications or explanations. Now, I waited. This was his move to make. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" he finally asked. I led him to my office, a modest space decorated with student artwork and photographs of our community programs. James joined us, his expression guarded but hopeful. "This is not what I expected," my father began once the door closed behind us. "What did you expect?" James asked, his tone neutral. "Wasted potential. Squandered resources." He gestured vaguely. "Finger paintings and macaroni art." I bit back a defensive response. "Why don't you tell us why you're really here, Dad?" He paced the small room, clearly uncomfortable with vulnerability. "I've been reconsidering some things." "What things?" I pressed gently. "My approach. My assumptions." He stopped at the window overlooking the main gallery. Eleanor showed me some of Harrison's journals from his final years. Things he never said to me directly. This was news to me. "What kinds of things?" "His regrets, mostly." My father's voice had lost its usual commanding edge. How he wished he'd balanced business success with personal fulfillment. How he admired your conviction in following your own path. He turned to face us. How he feared he'd taught me to value the wrong things. "Grandpa loved you, Dad," James said. "He just wanted you to be happy, not just successful." "I don't know the difference anymore," my father admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For 40 years, I defined myself by what I built, what I owned, what I controlled. I thought that was what he wanted. What you both would want eventually. "We never needed an empire," I said quietly. "We just needed a father." He flinched as though I'd struck him, but nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that." "Too late, perhaps." "It's not too late," James offered. "Not if you don't want it to be." My father straightened his shoulders, businessman mode reasserting itself. "I'd like to see what you've done here. Really see it, not just the publicity version. Show me why this matters." It was a small opening, but more than I'd expected. "We can do that." We spent the next hour giving him a comprehensive tour of the center. I showed him our classrooms where children from all backgrounds explored creative expression. James explained our operational model designed for long-term sustainability. We introduced him to instructors, students, and community partners. In the digital media lab, a teenage boy approached without recognizing who my father was. "Ms. Mitchell, can I show you my animation? I finished it today." "Of course, Damon." This is my father, William Mitchell. Dad, this is Damon Robertson, one of our scholarship students. The boy's eyes widened slightly, but he recovered quickly. Nice to meet you, sir. Would you like to see it too? Something in my father's expression shifted as he watched Damon's short animated film about his neighborhood. The teenager explained how he'd taught himself basic animation using YouTube tutorials before finding our program, and how he hoped to study film production in college. You have real talent, my father told him with surprising sincerity. Very impressive spatial awareness and timing. Damon beamed. Thank you, sir. I couldn't have made this without the foundation. Before Ms. Mitchell opened this place, kids like me didn't have anywhere to learn this stuff. As we continued the tour, my father grew quieter, more observant. In the painting studio, a young girl showed him her canvas, a vibrant sunset over city rooftops. It reminds me of something, he said, studying it carefully. Mom used to paint sunsets, I reminded him gently. Remember the one that hung in the living room? A shadow of recognition crossed his face. Grace always saw beauty where the rest of us just saw buildings. By the time we reached the community gallery showcasing student work alongside local artists, something had shifted in my father's demeanor. He stopped before a painting that caught his attention, an abstract work in bold reds and golds. This one speaks to me, he admitted, studying the canvas. There's something about the movement, the energy. The artist, a middle-aged woman named Sophia, happened to be nearby. Thank you, she said, joining our small group. I painted it after losing my job of 15 years. It represents the anger I felt, but also the possibility of reinvention. Reinvention, my father echoed, the words seeming to resonate with him. After Sophia moved on, he turned to us. I'm beginning to understand what Harrison saw in you, Abigail. This isn't just about art. It's about transformation. That's exactly what it is, I agreed. We're not just teaching techniques. We're creating space for people to discover their own voices, their own potential. We ended in my office again, the energy between us noticeably different than when we'd started. I owe you both an apology, my father said, the words clearly difficult for him. I was wrong to dismiss this work. Wrong to try to force you into roles that didn't fit. Wrong to make you choose between family and purpose. Thank you for saying that, James replied, his voice thick with emotion. It means a lot. What happens now? I asked carefully. I don't know exactly, my father admitted. I can't pretend to suddenly be someone different. The company is still my life's work. But perhaps, he hesitated. Perhaps there's a way Mitchell Properties could support what you're doing here. You mean financially? James asked. That, yes. But also with expertise. Real estate, development, expansion planning. He straightened his tie on more familiar ground now. Your growth will require strategic property acquisition. That's something I know about. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much had happened for that. But it was an olive branch, offered sincerely if awkwardly. We'd be open to discussing possibilities, I said carefully. As equal partners. He nodded, accepting the boundary. Equal partners. In the months that followed, we established a new kind of relationship, professional first, with the personal healing following more slowly. William Mitchell didn't transform overnight into a warm, demonstrative father. But he did begin showing up to foundation events, to planning meetings, eventually to occasional family dinners that gradually became less strained. Mitchell Properties established a community development division that worked in parallel with our foundation, focusing on affordable housing and neighborhood revitalization near our arts centers. James created the liaison role between the two organizations, finding his own path that honored both his business acumen and newly discovered social conscience. 1 year after my father's unexpected appearance at our gala, we stood together at Harrison Mitchell's grave. It was a private moment, just William, James, and me, marking the 2nd anniversary of his death. He would be pleased, my father said, placing a stone on the granite marker. Not just with the foundation's success, but with, he gestured vaguely between us, us finding a way forward together. He planned it this way, you know, I said, sharing the insight that had come to me gradually. The money, the test, all of it. He was trying to heal the family, not divide it. In the most complicated, manipulative way possible, my father added dryly, but without real rancor. He was a Mitchell, James pointed out with a small smile. We don't do anything simply. My father actually laughed at that, a genuine sound I'd rarely heard from him. True enough. As we walked back to our cars, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. What had begun with a burned check had evolved into something none of us could have predicted. A redefined family legacy, a reclaimed purpose, a slowly healing relationship. What my father thought he burned was just paper, I realized. What my grandfather really left me was the chance to discover my own strength and purpose. The true wealth Harrison Mitchell bequeathed wasn't measured in millions, but in the relationships rebuilt, the communities strengthened, and the creativity unleashed. His final lesson had indeed been his greatest gift. I looked at my father and brother walking ahead of me, discussing plans for a new collaborative project. 2 years ago, I couldn't have imagined the scene. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Have you ever experienced a moment of betrayal that unexpectedly led to something positive? Or discovered that what seemed like a loss was actually an opportunity in disguise? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of family, forgiveness, and finding purpose resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember that sometimes what appears to be an ending is actually the beginning of something far more valuable than what was lost. Thank you for being part of this story. I'm grateful for each of you.